Hi, I'm Rodney Creech, and I'm running for Preble County Commissioner. Tomorrow is Tuesday, May 6th, and I'm going to continue to ask for your support. Please talk to your friends, family members, neighbors, co-workers, and whoever you need to talk to get them out and vote tomorrow, as this is a big election. Over the weekend, there was some very negative advertisement that came out from my opponent. Definitely Washington-style politics. We do not need Washington-style politics in Preble County. It was a flyer with my name saying, "Warning, I'm going to raise taxes." A couple things here. Number one, if I was going to raise taxes, would I tell my opponent? Number two, I am not for raising taxes. I'm for what's doing best for Preble County residents and small businesses and businesses alone. I'm listening to the people. Please get out and talk to your elected officials, people that work at the courthouse, and the sheriff's department, and they will tell you how much change is needed in Preble County. We need new vision and new energy. And most of all, we need a positive leader. I would appreciate your support tomorrow on Tuesday, May 6th. Thank you.
We're on? Okay, I call this May 22nd, 2015 Commission meeting to order. Connie, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Robertson? Here. Commissioner Creech?
Here.
Commissioner Day?
Here. Would you all rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by prayer. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for being here today with us. We ask that you look over us today, do what's right for the citizens of Preble County. We ask that you be with the men and women out there that are working the fields, getting crops in the ground. Be with them to bring them home safely tonight to be with their families. We ask that you be with our military men and women. Reassure them that they will be home soon. We also ask that you look over all the residents of Preble County. Make sure that they all know that there are good times and bad times, but you are always with them. In your name, amen. Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome. Okay, today on the agenda we have public comments, general business. Items discussed, which are in no particular order, are the Preble County Landfill Stream 13, proposed 911 county-wide public safety communication system levy, capital improvement grant for the fairgrounds, update on Glenwood meeting held on May 12, 2015, and enter into executive session to discuss employment of personnel. Connie, do you have any additional items?
No.
Okay, at this point in time, public comments. All right, well,
Chris,
yes,
is there a copy of the document?
would you come up and state your name, please?
It's my understanding that you received a bid from someone for the fairgrounds grant, and if so, can some of us in the audience have a copy of it to look at as you discuss, please?
This is not a bid, this is from state purchasing.
That's just,
Well, whatever you got that you were considering, it would be nice to be able to see what you're discussing personally rather than just hearing about it.
yeah, we can,
Yeah.
I don't, probably just the front portion.
Do I have to make a public records?
No, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's
all pictures.
For ease, we can get you the entire document, but what you're going to want to look at right now is just the first portion of it.
There's always the first couple pages.
For ease of them making copies, I guess is what I was trying to do. We'll get you the entire document. The rest of it's just boilerplate on the specs of material and things like that.
All right, thank you.
Could you get Sarah to run a couple
Yeah.
copies? A few copies for those people. I tell you what, why don't we, while they're running copies for that, we'll discuss the 911 countywide public safety communications systems levy. All right.
Rodney, you have information?
I did. So I'll go first. Can I pass these out to you? Make copies, so. Hurt maybe. We got 3 more. Maybe 5 more, 6 more, I don't know. Probably 6 more would be fine. Take care of the front row here, and then she can take care of the back row.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, I didn't realize. I'm gonna wait till everybody else gets here. I'm gonna wait till everybody else gets here.
Is she making copies for everyone?
Sorry,
Is she making copies for everyone?
I'd like one.
Okay.
is that okay?
Yeah.
We're waiting on copies.
Again.
Copies myself. Questions when you're busy. I want to go down the hall. I'm gonna go make more copies myself. Go down the hall then.
I made 28 at our side here.
It's no big deal. Sure, good copies.
No. No. When it's frozen,
Should make copies. I think you guys are having conflicts. I apologize, I don't have any copies.
Round of applause.
A
round of applause.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I don't have anything that you guys need to look at, so.
What's that? Oh,
What's that?
Are we assuming these are the call board?
We ready? Yep. Sorry about that. If I had made 20 copies, there would have been 25 people here, so that's just the way it goes, I guess. But yeah, I'll go ahead and get started on my take. I created this handout that you'll see, and I think one of the big topics that we've been discussing, and then I'll get into kind of my take on the matter, but I think one of the big topics that we've been talking about is the city of Eaton and the Preble County PSAPs merging. I think one of the big takes from what I've been hearing is the city should continue to pay. They're the largest population in the county. They should continue to pay. In talking with some people at the state, they're surprised that we've not been collecting from everyone in the community. In most communities, they collect from everyone. We've not been collecting from anyone. The county's been taking care of the county, the city's been taking care of the city. I still stand by my stance that if we're going to charge the city for, if we're going to charge the city for 911 dispatch, the whole county should have to pay. If you look at these numbers, based on tax assessments and population, the pie chart, yeah, Eaton's our biggest community, but if you look at the rest of the communities, we've got some that are half the size of Eaton per population. So if we're going to charge a city, wait a second here. If we're going to charge a city of 8,400 for dispatch services, then why would we not charge a township of 4,500? We could actually have more calls to a township than a city possibly. I mean, it's not, now we're looking at call volume, not population. There's so many ways that this can be looked at. You can have twice the population and half as many calls. I think it's an all or nothing. I think everybody needs to pay, or we all pay at once. And again, I just kind of wanted to break it out in a pie chart form so you can see that it's a pretty good disbursement over the county. That's what, you know, these numbers are from the 2010 census as far as population, and then the county computation tax year. I got that from the auditor, so I just wanted to give that to you for visual look. I think if you look at it, nobody's getting penalized really. I mean, nobody as far as population. It's all pretty across the board. To kind of, I'm just going to make a statement here, or make a statement, so please let me get through this, and then the other two commissioners can give their take. But I just have, you know, the cost of everything continues to increase. What we've seen is the cost of with the 911 dispatch and communications is increasing as much as anything. Some of that is due to equipment manufacturers, mandates, just increased costs, business costs across the board. Based on the Kimball report, which has been referred to a lot in here, there was a report that was done. That data is from 2014 and 2014 alone. With what we're looking at with this levy, we're having to project out over 10 to 11 years. If anybody thinks that our costs are going to be the same in 11 years as they are today, that's crazy. In fact, when we start in 2016 with our new, with this merger, our costs are going to be $86,000 alone, just in personnel, and that above the 2014 Kimball report. So we've got to look out into the future and account for increases. So I guess, we've got two sets of numbers here. We've got the set of numbers that's been proposed by the sheriff. It's a budget that goes out into the future. And then we have Commissioner Robertson's numbers based solely on the L.R. Kimball report with no increased costs in the future. And that concerns me because we have to look out for the future of Preble County. And if we think we can afford this today, we got to worry about tomorrow also. We may be able to pay for it today, but we can't pay for it tomorrow, period. I've met with the sheriff many times. I've met with our auditor many times. It cannot be done. Again, the numbers in this report are accurate based on 2014. But 2 years down the road, we're going to be paying $86,000 more on top of that, and that doesn't even include our communication expenses and fees and capital expenditures that we're going to have coming up in the future. So, I think my biggest concern is we have two sets of numbers. We're not all on the same page. That concerns me because the sheriff does this every day, and we don't know what the future holds. The numbers today might look high, but in 10 years, we may be scraping the bottom because we don't know what's going to happen to future costs and healthcare, future costs, these fees which we have built in. I guess based on the sheriff's estimate, we would have to come up with an additional $844,000. We don't have that, and I guess I'm in full support of the levy. I don't like it. I don't like that we have to do it, but we also have to be fiscally responsible. And I use that word because the other side's going to say we got to be fiscally responsible, not do it. We got to be fiscally responsible and get a process in place that's going to be here. Because if we end up having an economic downturn, well, what do? Right now we're doing okay. Right now, we could probably pay it 1 year and then we're in trouble. What are we going to do if we do have an economic downturn? And this 911 PSAT merger is critical, and it needs its own funding source. And if we don't have a levy, we're going to have to figure out where to get it. And I don't think the townships and villages can afford. Based on that pie chart, we'll have to figure it out. But I'm telling you, I was a township trustee for 7 years, and if the county would have came to me and said, you need to ante up on this 911 dispatch, we'd have been, well, how? We can't do it. The villages can't do it. So that's where I'm at. There are going to be possibly some savings down the road after we do this merger, both for the city of Eaton and for the county, some possible savings. And we don't have a clue what that's going to be because there's going to be a lot of costs possibly up front. But I do give my commitment to the sheriff's department that any savings that is realized after that, I think we need to put back into the sheriff's department. I've been a strong advocate of the sheriff during my campaign and continued into my first year here. Public safety means a lot to our community, especially on the outskirts. When I was out campaigning, that's one of the biggest topics I heard about was public safety. So we have a community that wants good public safety. And again, I would give my full commitment to the sheriff's department that any realized savings that would be over and above, I would want to do that. But I think at this time, we need to give the voters a decision, a choice, and see what they think is important, because we know this is very, very important to the county. And the only thing I guess I just want to end with, and we've been talking about this up here for a couple of weeks, and with the two sets of numbers, like I said, that's probably my biggest concern because we're on different pages here. I talked to Denise last Wednesday. We got the numbers from the sheriff. She has her numbers, and I didn't know if you had a chance to follow up with the sheriff as far as your numbers and his numbers.
I will be using the sheriff's numbers.
Have you talked to the sheriff? Have you had any discussions with the sheriff?
Just on public record, yes. Only in
Okay.
public sessions.
So I think my biggest concern is there's a disconnect between. I think we really need to be working with the sheriff, and again, it just troubles me that that's not happening. That's all I have.
I just have one question. With these numbers, do you have the calls generated to 911 from these entities?
The calls generated?
The calls that
No,
come from the 911
I-
to the 911 dispatch?
I can't, that information can be gathered, but I've been putting a lot of time into this, and that's just where I drew the line was on that.
Okay, well,
And you can get that information from the sheriff's
it
office.
would be interesting to know what the call volume is per entity.
You can get that information from the sheriff's office.
You have something? Well, I have a handout also. So I'm going to pass out. Commissioner Creech will be assured now that we will be working from the same set of numbers. So, you won't have to be worried. That would be great. Thank you. All right. Some of yours are not pinned together here because of the last minute copies I had to make. Oh, there you go, thank you. Okay, I have enough. More, okay. So I looked at the spreadsheet that we were given at the last meeting, at the end of our last meeting. And, a couple of things, I have a couple of points to make about the House Bill 360.
You got a handout for us?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Forgot you guys. Imagine that. There you go. A lot of discussion about House Bill 360. So I read the Ohio Legislative Service Commission final analysis of that. And by the way, House Bill 360 has been replaced by House Bill 59 on June 30th, 2015. And it does limit the number of PSAPs a county can have. But a county our size can have 3. So we are well within that limit, and no one's forcing us to be 1 PSAP. The bill does state, though, that in order to be in compliance, the PSAP staff must be fully staffed with 2 dispatchers on duty at all times. The cost of the county doing this will be at least $320,000, $325,23. That is the $747,140, which is wages, benefits, and health columns. And I'm just going with the first year. There's 2%. The sheriff has put in 2% per. I'm on the first page of dispatch costs. So to be in compliance with the full staffed PSAP, it'll cost the county $320,523, which is, this is what the sheriff projected we will spend in 2016, minus what we are currently spending according to page 22 of the feasibility study. So according to the feasibility study, we are spending $426,617 currently for PSAP. Okay, so it'll cost us $320,000. House Bill 59 says that the penalty for not complying is losing half of our wireless 911 funds, which right now is about $45,000. So not being in compliance is quite a significant money saving. There is no threat of the state coming in and taking over our services or forcing us to merge with anyone. With that being said, I really do think that the merger needs to happen. I think that it makes sense to have 2 dispatchers on at all times. So I'm in favor of the merger, but I'm not in favor of the levy. Okay, so it isn't right to ask Eaton to contribute to the cost of our communication with the merger discussion. So I've split out the numbers the sheriff has given us into 2 parts. The first page is the dispatch costs. I want to talk about those first. And the second page that you'll have is my analysis of the dispatch merger with the sheriff's numbers. I used the 747-140, which is the first 3 columns of the dispatch costs. Now, I did use the feasibility study for operating costs because the operating costs on the dispatch, if you look at the dispatch page, those operating costs were only $74,000. The operating costs in the feasibility study were $165,000, which seemed to include everything like the office expenses and future tech costs. So I added, on that second page, you can see the dispatcher 747-140, which is using the personnel cost of the sheriff, operating cost of $165 from the feasibility study, which adds up to the $912,140. We do have the one-time transition cost, $84,000. So I still believe that a shared service agreement is the way to go to be in compliance with the state and thus continue to receive our $45,000 in 911 money. And saving the city of Eaton significant money. So with no levy, I propose the county pays $600,000 and Eaton pays $300,000, and we have the $900,000. And if you want to add 2% in going forward, I mean, that's only 2%. That's not millions. All right, so as for the communication piece, all right, so does anybody have any questions on the dispatch piece? I did add the post-warranty column from the sheriff's spreadsheet. I added that in, that's the consoles. We've been told that's communication, but since the consoles started all this argument, all this controversy, I added it into the dispatch costs. So, either way you go. Any questions on the dispatch piece thus far? These are the exact numbers that the sheriff gave us 2 weeks ago. All right. The next page is the communication costs. These are all the columns from the spreadsheet the sheriff gave us. And right now, the sheriff told me in an email that we are spending $74,000 for communication. I'd like to know how we go from spending $74,000 to $477,000. I realize that we have towers to replace that cost $1 million, but the new numbers in the capital expense column is over $3 million. With this $1 million that we're looking at, we need to discuss, we could get a low interest loan. Our county has an excellent credit rating. We could get a low interest loan, spread it out over 10 years, and put those payments into the sheriff's budget and pay for the tower replacement that he says we need. So maybe someone can explain to me how we're going from $74,000 to $477,000 with only needing $1 million for towers. Okay, so that's the communication piece. I asked our auditor, this last 2 pages, one of you may have 2 pages of the same thing, because I'm up here sorting at the last minute, so. But I asked our auditor to provide me with a breakdown of who would contribute what of the $1.3 million that the levy will generate. She provided me with numbers that the city would be bringing in. So this first page is what the total will bring in, $1.305,290.50. And the second page shows that the city of Eaton, with the levy, will bring in $215,560. That doesn't even cover the cost of our taking their employees and training them, because I think it's going to be at least $320,000 just to cover the employees the first year. So this $200,000 that the levy will bring in from Eaton doesn't even cover those costs. I'm suggesting that if the levy passes, the city pays $200,000 toward the expense of the dispatch center, and this will save them more than half of what they're currently spending. I also suggest that any money that we are currently spending on dispatch and communication be retained in the general fund. And according to the numbers I have, which came from the sheriff either directly or via the feasibility study, we are spending $657,000 between communication and dispatch. That's $583 from dispatch and $74 from the communication. If we pass a levy to take more money from the pockets of our residents to have a dedicated funding stream for dispatch, I think we should figure out a way to return the money that we are currently spending on dispatch and communication to the taxpayers. Maybe a reduction in sales tax. It could be something we could discuss. But if we're going to take more money out of one pocket, we need to try to restore it in the other pocket. We're going to have our dedicated funding stream. And my last point, and this is a real concern of mine. If we put this on the ballot and we don't need it, how are the people going to trust us when we do need it? When we come to them and we say, we need money. I'm saying right now from the figures, even the sheriff's figures, that we do not need a levy. The $1 million we can pay for, the tower replacement we can pay for with the low interest loan. If we had a shared service agreement with Eaton, we would not need a levy.
Anything else? Okay. Well, I guess for my take, we've been going through this since 2013. I look back through my notes, and that's my notes. When we initially started this, we decided to go with the study, form a committee, go through the study. The study has come up with some recommendations. I wasn't totally pleased with the study, but they did come up with some suggestions, some guidelines. And while I understand what the House bills state at this point in time, I do know that the push from the legislature is going to be minimum staff and minimum training. And I think that they're probably going to get all of that eventually. Some of this was done as a trade-off when the 911 monies, I forget what we paid before. Was it 32 cents originally? Originally it was 32 cents for every call you made or your cell phone. Went for 911. That was negotiated back down, but I do know the legislature, and sitting through our meetings, they've made it very clear that they've cut those monies. They restored them, I think, at 23, I believe they're at now. Is that correct, Sheriff?
25 now.
25 now. But it was a fight to get it there. They wanted to do away with those altogether. But they've made it clear they're going to streamline these PSAPs in some form. Now, what that is, I don't know. But I guess my statement to this is, we've gone through the study. The study said that the bottom line, that the not the most popular way, but the clearly the best way is to put it before the voters to fund something like this. I too believe that we need to put it before the voters, let them decide, and if that doesn't work, then we're going to have to figure out what we're going to have to do. In looking at reduction of cost in the future, there might be some reduction of cost. I don't know that that's going to be the case. I too believe that we need to take any savings and put that into additional deputies or whatever that may be. That's something, depending on what the dollars are, I don't know what those will be, but I think we need to, if there are additional savings, I think we need to work with the sheriff in a long and short range plan. The biggest thing is it's got to be sustainable. Having been through 2009 when we were here and we had to do layoffs, if you put people on and you can't sustain them long term, there are no savings whatsoever, and that really puts you in a bind. I mean, if you have to lay someone off and still have to pay them for 1 to 2 years out, there's no savings in the short term, and that's people don't understand that. So I don't want to get in that position, but I think we need to work with the sheriff. Unfortunately, the costs continue to rise with law enforcement, with everything, but with law enforcement, they just continue to go up and up. It's very frustrating. I know we're all frustrated. These guys do a good job, but a lot of times they're out here beating the streets, and they do their job, and these people beat them back home. So I don't know what the answer is there, but I believe we need to continue working with the Sheriff's Department to help his staff. So I think that my opinion is we need to let the people decide. If they decide they aren't satisfied with what we have, then we'll have to step back and take a look at it.
Being opposed to taking more money from the taxpayers does not mean that I am opposed to anything that the sheriff and police officers do in this county. They do an excellent job. I sat with the dispatcher for a very non-busy morning. She was pretty busy. Not being against the levy that the sheriff wants doesn't mean that I'm against the sheriff or his deputies or any of the law enforcement in this county. They are necessary. They protect our rights. When someone comes onto my property and someone steals something, I want to be able to call the sheriff and the sheriff be there to take a report and find a bad guy. So just because I'm for this merger, I think the merger would be a good thing for the city and the county. And just because I am against the levy to pay for it, especially when the communication costs go from $74,000 to $477,000 the first year, it does not mean that I am against what the sheriff and his deputies do, because they are important. You cannot have a civilized society without law enforcement, without peace officers. And not complying with the unfunded mandates, the state is not the boogeyman. The state, they cannot come in and force us to do things, they have to run through a process. They're elected also. And if the state continues to press these unfunded mandates onto us, then maybe they shouldn't be in office anymore. They're elected also. Currently, the 911, the wireless 911 funds that they're holding over our heads, that's the only teeth that this House Bill 59 has in it. The only teeth that it has is holding back the wireless 911 money, and that's 50% of the wireless 911 money. It's sitting in a fund. We have $320,000. I don't know what the exact number is, but we have over $300,000 sitting in that fund not being used. So not getting money that we're not using doesn't seem like much of a threat to me. I looked at the numbers and I used the sheriff's numbers, and we are well within, I mean, we're doing very well as a county. When we made cuts in 2008, that was a wise decision. That board made some smart decisions. But the sheriff's budget has been restored to pre-2008 costs. I mean,
334,000.
they're missing 334,000?
No, that's the 911 wireless fund.
Oh, okay. So the sheriff's budget has been restored from those cuts. We're doing well as a county. And the last thing I wanted to say about the feasibility study, it stated that the cleanest way to pay for this is through a levy. It didn't say it was the only way. I don't know, and I haven't been presented with any city and county, any city that has been able to take their money, take their costs from a PSAP and give it to the county and walk away. I've not been presented with any example of that anywhere in the state where the city who already has the service doesn't pay something for it to someone when it's no longer their service. They contract out with someone to provide the service.
I think you just answered your own question. You said you haven't talked to anybody that's not paying into it. And I think you just validated my point that everybody needs to pay into it.
Okay, well,
Because if you call up the CCAO, they've never seen a county that people aren't paying into it.
right, and
So in order for us to, if you want to be like everybody else, everybody needs to pay into it. That is a levy.
well, and that would be up to the sheriff to decide what is a fair thing for all the villages and the townships to pay. Because to me, that's the way it's been working. We've been sitting over here minding our own business. If there was a financial struggle and a financial trouble with the sheriff providing that service, I would hope that we would have already heard that. And if he needs that money from the villages, I can't imagine it would be a significant amount.
Divide 1.3 million over.
But if
All
he
townships.
needs that, then he can come to us and say, I need to ask the villages and the townships for money. Up until this point, we haven't come to that, we haven't crossed that bridge at all. It's never been even brought up until we started talking about this merger and Eaton not wanting to pay anything.
I think another point I'd like to make, Denise, because you're making some good points, is you said that the sheriff's budget's back to where it was in 2009.
2008, 2009 when it was.
2009 is when they made cuts. We have a lot less people. The costs have continued, the costs have gone up, or the cost of fuel, the cost of vehicles, the wages, the insurance. So we're paying the same amount in 2009 for a lot less, and that's what's going to happen with this.
Well,
The
but
costs
we
are
can-
going to continue to increase and increase and increase. And, I mean, when you go, this used to be a 20-ounce bottle of water. We paid $1 for it. Now it's a 16-ounce bottle of water, and we're paying $1.90 for it. That's the same as what we're going on. I mean, you're paying more, and you're maybe getting less. You know, at the store you're getting less. Now with here, we've got to keep our quality of service up, and we are going to be paying more and more and more. There's nothing you can do about it. But I'm telling you right now, if you can find $844,000 over the next 13 years, and it's not going to put everybody in a pinch, then I agree we don't need a levy.
Oh, we get to spread the 800,000 over 13 years?
Don't put words in my mouth.
I'm just asking.
I said if you come up with $844,000 a year for the next 13
And
years.
see, I just showed you where we don't need $800,000 per year. I just showed you where we don't need that.
That's all I had to say.
Let's see, there was something you said I wanted to respond to. Oh, if we ever come to a point where we are in danger of losing any of our public safety, in danger of losing any of our services that are vital to us in the county, I will come to you and I will tell you we need a levy. If we come to that point where we're scratching the bottom and we're trying to figure out, you know, we're not sitting on $4 million in our cash balance, when we're down to next to nothing and we're ready to lose those vital services, I will assuredly come to you and tell you that we need a levy. Right now, that's not the case at all. We're not, and when I do that, it will be after we've made cuts to whatever we can make cuts to make sure that we are spending your money as responsibly as possible. But when I come to you and say we need a levy, I want to be able to say it to you with a straight face, we need a levy. Right now, I can look out and say, we do not need a levy. We have the money to do this with a shared service agreement with Eaton.
Chief Rohr, would you like to come up, please?
Absolutely. Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to address the commission. I'm Jack Royer. I'm here in 3 different capacities. Professional capacity as the fire EMS chief for the city of Eaton. I'm also the chairperson for the Preble County Chiefs Association, which is fire EMS chiefs. And I'm also a resident of the city of Eaton. First of all, I was asked by commission, city staff, the sheriff, the police chief to sit on the committee that's been looking at this for over a year. I would address the Kimball report as being incomplete. There were questions that were never asked that should have been asked. The numbers are very vague. They are the process used for that is a template that's applied to our demographics. And it is in fact a snapshot of what takes place. The Kimball folks spent 1.5 hours with fire and EMS chiefs asking very, very few questions about what the impact of our current service is. On a personal level, as a Preble County resident living in Eaton, don't ask me for more money from the standpoint of we pay taxes to the county. If you're going to provide service to other county residents at no cost, then the city of Eaton shouldn't be paying anything additional. The users of the service should be covering the cost of that service. As far as tax cuts, as far as cuts in services, I think since about 2010, your sheriff's been riding a lawnmower, correct?
Within that.
Okay, I think there's better use of his time than riding a lawnmower, so you can't tell me that cuts aren't affecting service. As a provider of fire and EMS services to the city of Eaton, Washington's township and 1/2 of Jackson Township, I can tell you when we have a crash out in the county, those crashes are now diverted primarily from Preble County sheriffs to Ohio State Police because of lack of available resources to respond appropriately. So we can be on the side of a car crash for 15, 20 to 25 minutes without any law enforcement help, without any. So now we're directing traffic. We've got continued traffic response that provides additional dangers to the responders. Okay? We've suffered the same downturns in the city of Eaton. We're understaffed in the police division, we're understaffed in fire and EMS, and the best use of the fire chief's time is not plowing snow. But that's what we do to make things happen. And what you're going to find with public safety responders is all of you as residents have probably seen no lack of service. That's because we as individuals will not let that happen. We won't let it happen. And the dispatchers will work long hours. The sheriff will mow grass. The fire chief in the city of Eaton will plow snow because that's what has to happen for you guys to receive continued service. We've got one foot on a banana peel and the other one in the tar pit. Okay? I started this business 40 years ago. I was dispatched with a $150 radio, and I paid for my own scanner for $50. Okay? We had 3 phones that rang into my parents' business, my parents' phone, my home, and my uncle's home. That's how we took emergency 911 calls. Can't do that. Can't do that. Technology doesn't even support that. At some point in time, service demands exceed resources that are available. You can find the money to support this at the county level, but as an Eaton resident, I want my money to go back into public safety services. I want to see our police department fully staffed. I want to be able to give my part-time and full-time employees adequate pay raises to meet the inflation costs that are going, and we've not been able to do that since 2008. Okay. We pay about 18% as City of Eaton residents into the county. Okay. And if you're going to find money out of general fund, then don't ask us for additional money. We're going to take that money and want to put it back into public safety services so we can get back to where we need to be. From a fire and EMS association standpoint, we meet on a bi-monthly basis. The sheriff is there. He has staff representation when he's not available. And there's not a meeting that doesn't go by that we don't talk about inadequacies with 911 communications. And the response is we're doing the best that we can with the resources we've got. That's not adequate. I probably march into Chad's office more than he would like to see me because of inadequacies with communication in 911. In our business, seconds count. Fire doubles in size every 30 seconds. So if that dispatcher can't pick up the phone because she or he is the only person in there for an additional 30 seconds, that fire could get away to the point that we can't contain it to the kitchen. We can't contain it to the pot on the stove. And now we've got significant structure damage and the potential that somebody gets displaced. And that's really, really sad. And the worst part of that is we personally feel bad that we can't make that change. We can't make a difference. And it all starts with communications and 911. You take a look at any significant emergency, whether it's here, whether it's Preble County, whether it's Ohio, whether it's anywhere in the U.S., and you look at statistical reports and analysis of post-fire incidents, the number one problem that comes up at every incident is communication. We've got the opportunity to take us from the dark ages with communication to have a system that could essentially provide adequate service to the residents. We live it every day. We wait for that dispatch to come out. We want that dispatch to come out adequately. We want that dispatch to come out with the appropriate information so we can respond quickly. We want that information to come out in a timely fashion so that we have a chance to do what we're asked to do. Now, is it happening today? There's problems in the system. The resident or the taxpayer doesn't see that because we work really, really hard to try and manage that. It's to the point that it's going to break. And we're telling you that right now. And I think when you saw that sheriff on that lawnmower for the first time, you should have recognized that. When I put a plow on my truck, I made it pretty clear to my administration that I'm going to do my part, but down the road, we can't keep doing this. We were fortunate enough in the city to put some money back for capital improvements, and then our illustrious governor decided to balance the budget on the backs of the citizens in the communities, and we've lost close to $700,000 in revenues for the city. The county has suffered similar losses in tax revenue that should be coming back to us. It's no longer coming back. That's going to have a significant impact, and that was a 3-year step process where we are going to see the significant impact of that in this coming year. So that fire truck that we were fortunate enough to buy 2 years ago, when you talk about inflated costs, and Commissioner Creech mentioned that costs have risen. The truck that we bought for $350,000 2 years ago is $450,000. So when we look at communication costs and computer costs and console costs, those are real numbers. They're not inflated. And we need to plan for infrastructure upgrades. And if you take my money and finance it, when there's another way, I'm going to be pretty upset about spending money in finance charges that don't have to happen. That's not good use of funds. I'm also a user. I am a consumer of the 911 service. And I know what my expectations are, and I know what the standards call for. Somebody is supposed to pick up that phone in 40 seconds. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen every time. A dispatcher cannot do everything that needs to be done sitting in an office by themselves. As indicated, you are all supporters of this in this consolidation and getting those two dispatchers together. When they're on the radio and I need a second medic for a serious car crash and they can't answer me on the radio because they're on a telephone call taking another 911 or a dog bark complaint or whatever the case may be, that creates delays. And we're in a business where seconds count. And as a user, and I can speak for the Preble County Chiefs Association, it's inadequate and it's got to be corrected. Okay? At the last meeting, we did the 911 communication presentation. We had similar questions that you all asked the sheriff the last time I was here, and we answered those to the satisfaction that they gave us a unanimous support of moving forward with this. That was with 100% participation in fire EMS agencies in Preble County. They need your help. They express those concerns every 2 months to the sheriff about a system that's pretty close to fracture. Regarding general fund dollars, if you can commit, that's great. You're here for another 3 years. You're up for re-election next year, and you'll be here for another 3 years, 2 years.
No, I'm up for re-election
You're
also.
up for re-election. That support for 911 communications emergency services may not be there with your replacements if you're not successfully re-elected. That impacts us as users dramatically. General fund dollars are discretionary dollars to a certain degree. And when you're talking emergency services and you're talking 911 and you're talking communications, the only way to assure that those services continue and that you all don't get interruption of services is dedicated funding. House Bill 360/House Bill 59. When legislation is passed, it is only that, it's legislation. The subcommittees are then put together to craft the language and the requirements for that. I sat on the regional 911 communications subcommittee. I hit quarterly meetings with the sheriff. The restrictions are coming. These are being forced from the federal government to the state, to the tune of putting close to $90 million in state dollars into communications infrastructure. Okay? That communication infrastructure is going to force change. Regardless of whether the language is there today, you have got to trust people that have been in this business a number of years to tell you how it works. I've been doing this for a long, long time, involved in lots and lots of state, national, and local issues. And I'm telling you that you need to come up with dedicated funding for this service.
Thank you, Chief Rohr.
I have a comment. Very well, it's Eaton, Ohio. Since our last meeting, I did a little research to try to find out, what was the premise behind this House Bill 360/59. And one of the things I came across was Cuyahoga County. And that's where a lot of their attention was and their drive to pass this bill. Cuyahoga County has 45 PSAPs. One county. They have the largest number of PSAPs in the entire country, not just Ohio. So this is what kind of got their energy going and saying, wait a minute, we got to get control of these PSAPs. We have PSAPs coming out of our ears here. So I guess I don't understand the emergency we have in this county to suddenly take all this away from Eaton and take the whole thing on our backs. And then it's going to cost us more money in the long run also. Are we fixing an emergency that doesn't exist? Where is the drive for the merger? Other than, all I've heard is this House Bill 360. This doesn't say we have to merge into one. I see no language at all that says that. So where's the emergency that says we have to merge? Unless it's a great cost savings, and I haven't really heard the cost
It
savings
would be
yet.
a great cost savings to the city of Eaton.
Okay, that's one benefit to one group, but,
Right, on the backs of the rest of the non-Eaton residents.
okay.
Of this 1.3 million, Eaton will contribute 215,000. The other 1.1 million will come from the out of the city residents.
It's very generous of the county to want to take that on, but I'd like to see some more thinking on this before we jump in the fire. You mentioned about a $334,000 wireless fund that kind of sits idle, not being used. Can somebody answer why is that not being used, or
I can't.
what's the,
It can only be used for certain things.
oh, so it's earmarked?
Well, when it was initially put in, it was for wireless, and then Sheriff, if you want to speak to that, you understand that better than I do.
Sure. Let me come up.
Please, if you would. And I don't claim to know all about it, but I'm just going on what the initial intent was and what we're allowed to do now.
I think the initial intent of the Wireless 911 Fund was to enact something that could help local governments keep up with the changing technology. And with the wireless, a majority of 911 calls don't come from wireline anymore. That's not from your house, it's from the wireless technology. So that was impacted. We started at 32, we're currently at 25. They removed the sunset on that. But once again, that falls into the language of the state that has said you can only use this money for wireless 911 technology. You don't have a lot of discretion. It's very narrow in scope in what you can use that for, much like the $5 assessment that we have in the county now. So it's extremely narrow in scope in what you can use it for. We have, I think last meeting I said we generate about $90,000 annually. It doesn't generate a lot that can be done with 2 PSAPs. We do use money out of that each year in our budget, but it doesn't go very far. So it builds up because it's in such narrow scope and what you can use it for.
So does that only come into the county and then the county disperses it to
It
the other
comes-
PSAP, or?
It comes to the county, and then through my budget, through the budgeting process here, we cover cost for, certain cost for Eaton's PSAP and our PSAP. So both PSAPs benefit from that currently.
Do we have a current list of what we are allowed to spend this money on? I mean, we
That
should
would
know
be-
what we're allowed to spend it on. I mean, I heard training. If we're going to take on 5 new dispatchers plus a supervisor, they're all gonna need to be trained. So I heard that we could use that for training. I don't know, I've not heard a list of what, all I've heard is, can we spend it on this? No. Can we spend it on this? No. So I would like to have a list of, here's what you can spend this money on.
It's, you know, what you can, I'll provide you with the list. It's also in the Attorney General's opinion that I provided to the board as well on the narrow scope of what you can use it
What
for.
is the date of that Attorney General's opinion?
Without looking at it, I don't
Could you
have
send it
it.
to me again, because I can't seem to find it.
Sure, I'll forward it to you. Yeah, so hopefully that answers your question, Terry. It's extremely narrow. I can get you a copy of the AG's opinion.
Yeah,
if
it'd be
you haven't
nice to
seen
see
it yet.
what
Well,
items
and
it
it was only
covers. It
discussed
sounds
on
like it,
wireless.
for this very thing, it sounds like what it's supposed to be used for, and we're not using it. Upgrade equipment, because most of this is equipment.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. the one thing is I was saying a minute ago, one of your points is that everybody pays their way for this. I think that by putting this before the voters, they have the option to say, does everybody want to pay for this? I think that's only the fair way. I know you mentioned caller volume and this and that. That's not always accurate of what's going on in certain areas. I mean, it just depends on what's going on, where the problems are of the day, things of that nature. So, call volume may or may not be the fairest way to do it. That can be somewhat skewed depending on how things are working at that particular time. But I guess my opinion is that this would be a way for the voters to have a say in it. This would fund this, as Jack said. It's a system that's underfunded. I believe getting it all under one roof is the way to go. That's my opinion.
And I say we already take enough money from the people of the county, the taxpayers of the county, who are trying to feed their families and run their businesses, to pay for this. So, oops.
Terry Willis again. So what happens if we would not merge? What's the alternative?
Nothing.
What happens?
That's
Does Eaton lose their 911 service altogether? You guys collapse, or do we have to pick you up then, or the county would have to pick you up?
These
Saying you, I'm Eaton now.
These are
I'm-
unfunded mandates. Eaton has its own governing board.
Yeah.
They have their own PSAP. If we don't do anything, then things will stay exactly the way they are. I think enough evidence has been given that a merger is a good idea. But if we do nothing, we continue to govern our PSAP, they continue to govern their PSAP. There's no change in what's going on right now. To improve services, the merger would improve services, I believe.
The mandates that's coming, you have to have 2 people on staff at all times. Right now we have 1.
How many
So
dispatchers does Eaton use?
So what you're gonna
Have
have,
one?
you wanna talk about saving money, you're gonna have 2 expensive PSAPs that are running inefficiently. It only makes sense to combine them. We're, as a county, the Four Corners, we are saving money, because you're gonna have 2 expensive PSAPs if we continue to, we all gotta hire people. Our expenses are going up. So it only makes sense to combine.
Then if we
Consolidate.
combine, we should be saving money, not end up incurring more costs.
And Eaton will be saving money. And if we did it,
And we're gonna be spending a heck of a lot more.
only
So-
if we're in compliance, because the only punishment is losing that $45,000.
And I can tell you as a county commissioner, I wanna be compliant.
So what
I
I'm
would
saying
like
is,
to
if
see
you
some
put
plans.
a levy on the ballot and say we're saving money, they're gonna say, well, what's this money for?
As a leader of
Why are
our
you asking us for
community,
more money if this merger is saving us money?
as one of the leaders in the community, I do want to be compliant. I think that's setting bad precedent. I'm not going to do things we need to do what's right.
Compliant for 2
We
dispatchers.
need to provide the service that needs to be provided.
The compliance you're talking about is the 2 dispatchers.
I'm talking compliance with state mandates.
Which is
That's
the
coming.
two
2
dispatchers.
dispatchers. Okay, I just want to clarify. So how much money would it cost to add an additional dispatcher to the county side, and how much would it be to add one to the Eaton side?
It would cost the county at least $320,000. That's just the employee cost. That's not anything in training or anything like that. It would cost us at least, according to the sheriff's figures, adding the 4 dispatchers and 1 supervisor. I think that's what.
That would be to cover the whole
we're talking
thing.
about. That would cost us another $320,000, and that would put us in compliance.
And that does not include any increases in the future.
No,
But
that's
that would be
first
with the
year
merger,
cost.
That's just
right? That would be one
2016.
center.
And that would just be our system being in compliance. They have their own governing body, that would be, their PSAP that would be up to them to decide how they were gonna become in compliance with the state.
Okay.
That's just us becoming compliant.
Okay.
It's a lot of money.
Sounds like a lot of money just to add 1 dispatcher
No, it's
per
4.
shift?
No, you
4
got 1 per
dispatchers
shift.
and then a
1 per
supervisor
shift.
is what the sheriff
Okay.
is proposing.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Plus benefit.
And that doesn't include any
That
increases.
includes the benefits. That's the entire salary, health benefits, and whatever the other
If I had to guess, I would guess this wireless fund, one of the things that you're not allowed to spend it on would be salaries, like to increase. I could see them saying that in there. I haven't seen it written, but that would make good sense.
And again, it
Because if
comes
you didn't
back
spell
to-
that out, people would be using it as salary.
That is the Attorney General's opinion, and I think it would be very bad for a county to go against the Attorney General's opinion. I'm not doing that.
Well, I used to
That's
work,
for the
I used to work for the
wireless.
federal government, and it depends on how you ask the question, what kind of answer you're gonna get to. So I wonder what question was actually asked the Attorney General.
I think I've seen this Attorney General's opinion, and I believe it addressed wireless, the wireless 911 fund and not the other one. But spending $320,000 to not lose $45,000 doesn't really make a lot of sense.
I agree.
Jack, did you have anything?
Nope, thank you though.
Can I say something?
Please.
David Hoover. Got a question. How many people in this room ever called 911 or had to use the dispatch? I know right now, I've got a 456 number, but I live outside the city of Eaton. If I call 911 on that, it goes to the city, which the city then transfers it to the county. It's just one extra step. I mean, I never used the 911 in my instance, but I knew on the cell phone, I called the county dispatch for my dad. And when you're on that phone, and if they had to be cut off because we don't have another dispatcher because they had to answer another call, when it's a life-threatening situation, until you've been there, you don't realize what it is. Well, I've got another question here. I was going over your numbers here, Denise. On your first page, you have dispatch costs.
Uh-huh.
Okay, annual cost of $821,000.
Right.
On your next page, you had the merger budget.
Uh-huh.
Dispatch of $747,000.
Right.
Okay, that's two different numbers there.
Well, these numbers are, the dispatchers, just cost for the employees, are the first three columns. Wages, benefits, and health insurance. That's just for the employees.
Okay,
Then my second number came from the feasibility study because the sheriff's numbers, the 911, CAD, post-warranty, and other, only adds up to $84,000. Let's see, where is that? Oh, okay, only accounts for $74,000. So the number that I used, the operating cost, the 165,
yeah,
came from the feasibility study because it listed office expenses and the things that are in the columns here from the sheriff's numbers, plus things like office expenses. So I bumped up the number. I used the feasibility number because that seemed more like a reasonable number. Because 74,000, I don't see any office expenses column in the sheriff's budget, his sheriff's numbers. So that first column is the personnel costs from the dispatch, the sheriff's numbers, 747,140. The 165 comes from the feasibility study, which talks about the operating expenses, and it adds up to 912. If you want to go just by the sheriff's numbers, the first year costs are only $821,000. And I don't think he accounts for, office expenses and stuff. At least that's not what I see in these columns that he's given us.
okay. So you come up with a total cost of $912,000.
According to the sheriff's columns for employees and the feasibility study for operating costs, which the sheriff gave
Okay.
the feasibility.
Well, you go on down here, you're gonna charge the city of Eaton $300,000. So the county already pays $582, so you're cutting into the sheriff's budget another $30,000 there?
We are currently paying almost $600,000. I was rounding.
Okay,
I just rounded it. I rounded the $900,000 and split it for $600,000 and $300,000 because it seemed like a fair way to do it.
okay. Now, we've got $1 million tower renovation,
Uh-huh.
and you're figuring that, paying it over,
10 years?
Will it last that long?
10 to 15 years is what we were told.
10 years? I mean, you know, we're in the computer age where things last 5 years, and then you're pushing it sometimes. What did this tower last us this time, 10?
We were told 10 to 15 years.
Okay, so you gotta be on the safe side of that, because in 8 years, they say, we've got new stuff, or what kind of insurance do you have if lightning strikes it?
I'm sure they're insured.
Okay. And that's going to come out of general fund? What would that payment be over 8 years?
No, actually, what I propose is that we get a low interest loan for that $1 million for the 10 years.
Okay, but where are you gonna pay
And put it in
for
the
it?
sheriff's budget, out of general fund.
Out of general fund?
Because the general fund, the sheriff's budget is out of the general fund.
So you're paying for that additional out of the sheriff's budget, the general fund?
We would put it into the sheriff's budget for him to pay the payment, yes.
And how much is that?
Oh, I don't know. We have a big discussion on the towers. I'm not even sure, I'm a little confused because I was told that we don't own those towers, or we own some of them.
We own one tower, 3 of them are on water towers, and where's the other one, Sheriff? We don't, it's not the towers, it's the equipment on
The
top of the
equipment on
towers.
the
The
towers.
towers doesn't matter, it's the equipment on top of the towers.
Okay, so that's where I
We
was
don't
confused.
own water towers.
Okay.
I was told towers.
Well, I
Towers.
just, you know, you're wanting to do this loan, but what's it going to cost?
I'm sure we could get you a cost of that. It's going to be less than $4 million or $3 million over the life of this communication. Right now,
Does this merger dispatch include, how many dispatchers did you put in here?
11 dispatchers and then a supervisor, which is what the sheriff discussed. Those are the numbers that he gave us to staff the dispatch.
But you're going to pay for that $1 million tower out of general fund over,
Over a 10-year period, right?
okay. I just wondering what the cost is going to be.
I'm
Figured.
sure I can get you a cost. I can email you the cost of what it would be. We would add it to the sheriff's budget. We would not be taking it from his budget.
Mhm.
We would add the payment into his budget. He would make that payment. We do that
So-
kind of stuff all
so
the
you're
time.
With these figures here, though, you're taking a little extra out of the sheriff's budget for this dispatch.
No, we would have to supplement.
Okay,
from the
that's
sheriff's
not what I read, you know.
I'm just saying that the general fund and the sheriff's budget come from the same budget.
Right.
So whatever happens to the sheriff's budget, it comes from the general fund. So you can say it comes from the sheriff's budget, but the
Well, yeah.
sheriff's budget is general
Well, you
fund.
give him so much money to do things.
Right,
So, I mean, this all falls under the same thing.
right, and we
This
would
is
give him
allowance.
enough money to pay for these new employees.
Okay. But you're not gonna add anything extra in to help boost, to get him up a little bit? Patrolman?
The other two commissioners have just voted to give him another detective. I wasn't opposed to that, I just wanted to wait until this discussion was over. We have added, I have a paper somewhere, Chris gave it to me, we've added a detective, we've added another dispatcher, and I think another road detective. Is that right?
2 detectives and a dispatcher.
Okay, so we've added 2 detectives and a dispatcher. I have supported.
Since the downturn in the economy.
Since 2009?
I have
Yeah.
supported the
Okay.
things in the sheriff's budget. I have supported the things that have happened. You know, we put the money through the chiller. The only thing I didn't support was the hiring of the detective, and that's only because I didn't know where this discussion was going. I wanted to see where this was gonna go before we made that decision. Because I thought we needed another detective, but I wanted to wait, just to see where this discussion would lead us.
Okay. And you have money in the general fund to support this tower acquisition then, huh?
We would have enough money to take out a loan and stretch it over 10 years to pay for
We
this.
have enough money to take out a loan, that's, if you have the money, then why are you doing a loan? That makes no sense.
You don't ever take loans in your business?
Not
You
if
don't
I
ever
have-
take loans in
not
your
if I got the
personal
money.
life?
Not if I got the money, what you just said totally contradicted itself. If we got the money, we can take out the loan.
Sometimes we take out loans for big projects.
For the cash flow.
Most people
I guess
do
my
not
point is,
we pay cash for a house or cash for a car. This is a big expense that we could spread over 10 years and make it a little easier to pay for.
What if we have a downturn, sales tax wise drops off and everything else drops off?
Then we would be talking, when we cross that bridge, then I can come to people and say we need a levy. but we're not in a downturn, we're pretty stable. If there's a downturn, and I really look at the numbers and say, oh, we're in trouble, I will not have a problem going to people and saying, we need a levy. We're in trouble, but we're
Have you
not
done
there.
any studies on passing levy when things are down or up, you know, the difference?
We're not really up.
Well, I know we're stable, but, I mean, when we go down, I'll tell you this, Washington Township's emergency levy went down last fall.
People are not, they
It is
are
a
not in the
renewal.
mood for us to take more money from them. And you just proved my point. They are not in the mood for us to
I know,
take
but,
their money.
but right, if things get worse, they won't be.
I don't project things getting worse. I don't project them getting better either. I think if we can do,
Okay.
you know, if we can remain stable and keep our budgets under control,
One other question on the levy, that's on assessed value, right?
yes.
Okay. Not appraised value, assessed value.
Oh, well, no, wait a minute, I don't know that. I'm sorry, I do not know
That's
that.
true. I checked with the blonde.
It's assessed,
Yeah.
yes.
And I guess, you know, what I'm hearing, and this is very good information, we're gonna pay an additional $330,000 a year for added employees due to mandates. We're gonna have an additional $100,000 plus dollars for towers. Can the county sustain a $400,000 increase per year?
We don't
Along
have,
with the other increases, the answer to that is no.
we do not have to comply with that unfunded mandate from the state. And if the city wants to save significant money, this merger will happen, we'll have a shared service agreement, and we will have $100,000 plus the $30,000 I said, $130,000 more added to our budget. That's not an insurmountable amount. I don't see where we need to take millions from the taxpayers when we don't need millions from the taxpayers.
Anything else?
Yep, I'd like to say something. I understand his point here, you know, we're gonna have to pay, if we take out a loan, we gotta pay one and more. I get what Rodney's saying, I get what Mr. Haber's saying, but it's not like it's unheard of. We do take out loans for stuff down at the landfill on a regular basis on big expenses, so it's not something new. You know, I don't know whether this is gonna pass or not. I understand chief lawyer's argument, that's been mine, that that's going to be the main issue as far as nobody else is paying for it. Why should the city be Eaton? I get that. However, trying to pass a levy in the county where they are regularly getting something for basically $5 and saying, we're gonna drop the $5, but we're gonna raise it basically $50 per $100,000, there's gonna be people sitting out, wait a minute. I was paying $5, now I'm going to be paying $100, $200 more or more. You're gonna have an issue in the county trying to pass that. This idea of, you know, I think everybody wants more protection, I get that, but we're not talking more deputies for the sheriff. I mean, there hasn't been a commitment here that, hey, this $400,000 to $600,000, half that's going to the sheriff to put more people on the road. We're talking, we have two pies here, one group of dispatchers at the city, one group at this county, we're merging those, we're adding one administrator. And these people in the county are gonna be asked to pay 10 times, 30 times more. And I think you're gonna have a problem passing that levy. If you wanna come out and say, hey, sheriff's gonna get more deputies, we're gonna go after the evildoers or whatever, you might have a better chance, but we have this fight over this, or non-discussion. The city's already committed, at least last time, that they said they're going to put some of this money into more enforcement in the city. And, you know, that's gonna sound good to city residents, but county residents, we're getting we're getting an administrator. We're growing government, and we're gonna be charged 10, 30 times more for the average person. And, you know, that's a pretty simple argument to look at, and I understand. Mr. Haber saying, you know, if you call 911, you have an understanding of what the problem is if you're put on hold or it gets dropped or whatever. But not everybody's using 911. How many are gonna gamble? Hey, I can get by without using 911. It's something that you think of until you need it. And so you're gonna have trouble passing it, from my point of view, unless he gets some type of commitment.
I probably wasn't clear enough. Did you hear me say?
I
that?
heard you say that.
Yeah,
But, you know, there's $400,000 to $600,000 out there if this passes.
that's what we don't know. That's why we're not
Yeah.
using a number, but yes, that would be committed from my standpoint to the sheriff. We can't talk numbers because we don't know. It could be
Well,
somewhere
yes.
between those two numbers.
Yeah, and this is, we've got another issue here, these numbers. We are all, you know, you wanna argue with her numbers, she puts good arguments against your numbers.
They're the sheriff's numbers, not mine.
And she pointed out issues with the sheriff's numbers, so, you know, whether they're, who's right and who's wrong, as long as you've got these discrepancies, and people believe both of you, you got an issue out there, so I don't know how you come to, an agreement on what's in the middle here, but, it doesn't add up. I mean, you gotta have more of a, I mean, there's gotta be more of a reason for a county resident to pay for this, or vote for this levy than one more administrator. Now, you say, well, we're under mandated for 2, that's fine, but there's also a fact, right now we have 2, who's gonna be the emergency dispatch center if the counties go down? Right now, it's the city of Eaton and vice versa. Who is going to, what, Montgomery County? Have we been having discussion on who's gonna be the emergency dispatch center if Preble counties for some reason gets hit by a storm?
You're talking about if something happens,
Well, you guys are talking about something happens 10 years down the road as far as expenses.
if it's, something happens now, you guys roll over to Dark County, is it?
Right, after it would go to them, the
Right.
second round is Dark County.
So there's
Thanks.
another layer there.
That's a good answer.
Right.
It's an answer.
And there would be similar arrangements if one PSAP to go to surrounding counties. So that has been,
So there's a shared service agreement, okay.
and I understand what you're saying, on the commitment
Yeah.
of where the dollars saved go. And I've said all along, when, as Rodney said, we can't put a dollar amount on it, but any dollars that were saved would be reinvested in the sheriff's department. Now, we would work with the sheriff on coming up with a plan. I stated this before, and I'll state it again. I don't manage his budget. It's up to him to come to us and tell us what he needs when he needed additional personnel. Sheriff, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're the ones that said, here's what I need.
Yes, sir.
And that's
And
what
I've heard that argument. I haven't listened in a few weeks, but I've heard you make that
No.
argument. It's a valid argument.
And if there, you know, what savings there are in the future, I would totally look to reinvest that back in the sheriff's department. But to sit here and tell you what those are, because we are speculating on a lot of different things here, I can't tell you a specific number.
And that's all fine and good. You're speculating on a lot of different numbers, but you're taking issue with her numbers.
No,
Yeah, well, no, this, in general, you can't both be right with the numbers that have been put before us. So there's a lot, when you say we're speculating, and you're basically in agreement with the broad, you know, you do lend some validation to what she's saying. You know, because, you know, when the landfill fire, I'll give you an example, the assessment, 10, 12 years ago, it looked good at the time. So you guys projecting out 10 years or saying we're going to face this problem in 10 years, we don't know what we're going to face in 10 years. These costs could come down on this equipment. We don't know. We know, last meeting, we were talking towers. Now we're talking the equipment on top of towers. If we're talking equipment, there's a possibility that's going to come down. We don't know. It could go up. But to speculate out 10 years that everything's going up, we don't know that. I don't pay as much for a computer now as I did 10 years ago, and it's a better computer. So I get the speculation, but we can't just have speculation claims on one side versus the other.
And the one thing that I will say, and I applaud Denise for trying to dig into this, but I'm listening to the sheriff. He's the one in charge of his budget. He's the one challenged by the residents of this county to operate his center. When we went through, the committee went through, looked at this, he presented those, but he also had input from Chad and Jack, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chad's sitting back there, but everyone had talked about these numbers. I mean, these are numbers that you looked at on your site also. So these numbers are real numbers as we know them today. So I have to put my confidence in the sheriff giving us a projection out.
And I don't have a problem with Denise's numbers. They're just 2 years old and she has no
Oh, no.
increases.
I'm using the sheriff's numbers, those.
From 2014.
No, these are the exact numbers
Okay,
that the
your first numbers were
sheriff
from
gave
2000.
us. No, they were
The
not
Kimball
my
report, the
numbers.
Kimball
They were the
report.
sheriff's
She has a
numbers.
legitimate argument there. I mean, you want to get on.
I'm not arguing, I'm just saying,
Well,
the
you wanna-
Kimball report numbers.
We're no longer using the Kimball report numbers.
You want to
We're
take
using
issue with
This is
the
the first
numbers,
time you've been using them.
Rod, you want to take
This is the
issues with
first
the
time
numbers
I've
she
heard
passed out last time. She was using the current numbers. Now, okay, you say you talk to the sheriff all the time. But you guys pop new numbers on that I don't think even Chris had seen at that point at the last meeting. You can't be doing that to fellow commissioners, you know, and saying, well, you got old numbers, here's the new numbers, when the first time she saw them is when you hold them up in a meeting. That's just on.
At the end of a meeting.
We knew it was 1.3 million all the time, it was just we didn't have the columns.
Well, you need to get that stuff to other commissioners and people on a.
Well, the 1.3 has been talked about for a long time.
Because that was what we were gonna bring in. So apparently we're gonna spend exactly what we're gonna bring in right away.
Well,
The
yeah, as long as
1.3,
this is going on.
the 1.3 has been talked about for a long time, Jeff.
Thank you.
As far as the details, I go back to say again, I've got to put my confidence in the sheriff as the elected official to give me his predictions, his projections. So,
Excellent.
And I think the sheriff's numbers are fairly conservative. I mean, he only adds 2% into each of those columns as the time progresses. It's not, the year-to-year is pretty reasonable to me. The 2% per year, you know, projecting out is kind of a, you know, conservative guess, I would think.
Mr. Willis, yes. In 2008, we had a downturn in the economy, didn't we? And the board, whoever it was at that time, did the right thing. They made cuts. They didn't bring out another levy, did they, to try to meet the expenses? When you have a downturn in the economy, that's not when you put levies on the ballot to pass. That means Dave and my salaries are going down in that year, so you're gonna get less money from me. I understand the budget for your government is gonna go down also, but you just have to make cuts. You can't squeeze any more out of Dave and I just because we've got a downturn in the economy, so that's not the time to put a levy on.
Because our economy is not booming. From 2008, 2009,
Flat.
we're not booming.
Flat.
People are not getting huge pay increases unless you're a
So if you
government.
got one dispatcher, where do you cut? If you got 2 sheriff deputies on the roads, where do you cut?
That
If
would
you got
be
the
up to
sheriff doing his
sheriff.
own grass, where do you cut?
You don't cut the
We made the
dispatcher.
cuts.
You don't cut the dispatcher. But in 2008, you made cuts because you had to. You don't have the money.
So we're gonna cut the cuts.
No, there's no one's saying cut
Where are
anything.
we, well, that's what I just heard, if we have a downturn, we're gonna have cuts. I'm not gonna.
Well, I heard from this board, if we have a downturn in the economy, that's when we put a levy on. I said, no, that's not when you put a levy on, when people don't have money.
But the sheriff, okay, so in 2008, we made the cuts out of the sheriff's budget, and all we did, I believe that it was a former board, they said, Sheriff, we need you to cut your budget. And I don't remember the numbers, but we need to cut your budget. They did this to all the elected officials, and everybody's budgets were cut. They let the sheriff decide where his budgets were to be cut. He made those decisions. Now, over the last few years, the sheriff's back up, his budget's pretty much back to where he was.
Right.
You know, and, you know, if we need more deputies, if there's a need for that, the sheriff comes to us and he tells us these things. And if there's a need, and he identifies there's a need, then, you know, we've supported that.
anything else?
I'm good.
Well, I guess, we need to have direction on this. I guess, having sat on the committee, having sat here for the last 2 years, having listened to everyone, I understand both sides of this. Understand the city of Eaton side, understand the Preble County resident side. But I, for one, going into this as Mr. Haber, I have never had to use it for an emergency situation per se, but my parents have, my grandparents have, my friends and neighbors have. And I can tell you this, I don't want that person on the end of the line to have to get cut off We heard in one of the presentations, and some of you may have heard it, but a lady that was having a stroke called in. And that, you know, I could just, if that person's sitting there by themselves, I don't know what I would do on the other end of the line. But my thought is, I think that put this before the voters is the fairest thing to do. If they turn it down, then we've got to regroup. But at least this gives us a dedicated funding stream now and in the future. Do I like more taxes? No. This is going to affect people adversely. I understand that. But if they say yes, we move forward. If they say no, we have to regroup and figure out what to do. What that is, we can sit here and speculate all we want. But until you're put in a position where, what do we do? I just think at this point in time, we put this before the voters. That's my opinion. Any savings that would be realized for the sheriff, we look at reinvesting back into the sheriff for deputies or whatever. As I say, I don't want to speak on behalf of the sheriff. He is the elected official for his department. But I know that, you know, some of the areas that he would like to focus on. So, you know, my feelings are we look at if there were savings, we would reinvest that back into the department to bolster up his staff. Hopefully he's on the same page. But my thoughts are we put it on the ballot, put it before the voters, let them decide, and then if it passes, we figure out. If it does not pass, we're going to be sitting back here having the same discussion again on where we go. That's my thought. I would make that in the form of a motion.
So
What motion?
I would move to place the,
We don't even have the ballot language.
Yeah, you can give me direction to work on it or whatever, but I don't have it all together.
I would give Connie direction to prepare a ballot language.
I'd like to make the comment that, sounds like you guys are gonna vote to put it to the ballot.
I have your name.
David Akers.
Thank you.
Gratis Township, sorry. There's a very, very good, strong chance it's not gonna pass. I would suggest that you guys start working harder on working a way to do this, or put it off, whatever you gotta do. I don't think it's gonna pass. The economics here are not up, they've not been up. I don't see them going up. I'm on fixed income, a lot of us are. Start working on another idea, because you pretty much count on it going down. That's all.
All right, thank you.
And I still say, if we put it on the ballot when we don't need it, when we do need it, they're not gonna trust us to pass a ballot. And I also believe that if I vote to put something on the ballot, and 51% of the people raise the other 49% taxes, I have raised taxes. So I will not be supporting this going to the ballot. I think that most of the time when these things are on the ballot, people see 911 and they get scared that they're losing something, they're losing a service, or you know, misinformation gets out there that there's, you know, losing something when it's not the case. So I will not be supporting this going to the ballot. I don't think we don't need it, and I don't think it's the right thing to do.
I believe it is, and what's your thoughts, Robert?
Well, I don't like it. I wish we had an extra $844,000 in our budget every year, but I know we don't. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be to provide the service that we have to provide. That's what we're going to have to do, and let the people decide.
So what I'm hearing is you agree also to prepare the language and
Yes.
we'll bring it back for a vote. Hi, would you please prepare the appropriate documentation? All right. Thank everyone for coming in and listening for the 911. We'll go to the next one, and I'm going to have to go back. It's the fairgrounds. We'll deal with it next. But I've got to go back and get my notes. I thought I carried them out and carried them on steps. I don't know how many are here for the fairgrounds, but she's got 3 copies if we need more.
two board members here.
Okay.